Hello friends, welcome back to part 10 of my 2022 Q3 Tesla earnings forecast review video series. So this is going to be a long one. All of the previous 9 parts were less than 9 minutes long. And I was going over a chart or 2 or 3 in each of those videos, and the format lended itself pretty well to that. I'm going to have to change formats now, and I'll explain why. Let me share my screen with you and bring up PowerPoint. So we've been looking at, let me go to the reading view. This is how we've been reviewing the first 9 parts of this video review series, looking at each of these charts in detail. Go watch those first if you would like, and then come back to this video if you haven't seen them all already. But, and there's the Stevenson indicator that makes me look blue whenever I put it up on the screen. Okay, so if I were to continue this same format of looking at 1 or 2 of these slides from here on, the videos would be worse. One of the reasons you're looking at already, the numbers are too small for you to read them if you're looking at this on your phone, right? So that's one problem. And the other is, you're looking at a screenshot of an Excel application that's open and live, which works when I'm putting out a Twitter thread, but you're like, yeah, James, we know. You didn't even bother to crop off the top or the bottom of the image so we can see all these other tab names down here. And so it would be tough for me to jump back and forth between slides or to show you stuff that wasn't included in the thread at all, that is in the spreadsheet, that these outcomes depend on. So I'm going to ditch PowerPoint now and instead bring up my live Excel model. And hopefully those numbers are big enough for you to read them. They're big enough for me to read on my laptop screen. If you're trying to view this on a phone, God bless you. I think it'll be easier for you to follow along seeing only 8 columns across instead of all those columns that were visible in the PowerPoint slide and in the Twitter thread. I try to just get as much information into that Twitter thread as I can. But this is not where our journey begins, traveler. This is the end of the road. This is the income statement as Tesla reports it. I am not just typing numbers in to these cells. You can see all of them are referencing cells higher on the page. Some of them in the 500s, some of them in the 800s, some of them are doing math, some of them are doing forecasting, etc. And I'm in my Q1 of 2023 column right now. So all of those are my forecast for what I think will happen that quarter, rather than the actuals that you see over here in Q1 and Q2 of 2022. And we can also do stuff in here, like hover over these notes and see, hey, what's in here? Oh, this cost of sales number included $168 million worth of idle charges for Giga Shanghai lockdowns closure, which was 1.2 percentage points worth of gross margin hit. So without that, the gross margins would have been 26.2 without those idle charges. All right, so this is not where we start. This is the end. So what I want to do is scroll way up the page and talk about the first step in forecasting, which is figuring out what the production and deliveries will be for each site and for each model. We have made it to the very top of this detailed model tab in my spreadsheet. You can see there's a bunch of charts in here, and we've gone through almost all of them already earlier in this video review series. There's a lot of ugly information around my inventory chart. I can actually look at this for total Shanghai if I want, and see, hey, look at that. That was a pretty pronounced drop-off in Q2, as you would expect, right? So, kind of some cool stuff that I've got going on here. How did the Fremont Model X do? Very poorly there for a while it was down. So that's kind of the purpose of this thing. But I'll put it back to all sites and models, which is how you saw it reviewed earlier this series. And a bunch of other charts here we've gone over. Some we haven't. Tesla Q would never have believed you in 2020 if you had told them that the record high regulatory credits revenue weren't going to happen until Q1 of 2022. They thought it was going to be 0 this year, and it's not 0. There's the EPS. You always get this error message when you try to plot a negative number on a log chart. And we'll have to come back to that. This was mentioned in a previous video, and we're back to our detailed model. And as long as I'm giving a tour anyway, I may as well continue the tour and show you my comparisons for when, right when Tesla releases their earnings, I go ahead and punch them in here to see how far off I was. And I have another tab here with more detail for the income statement to see how that's doing, so I can plot it onto a waterfall chart. It's not, there's no variance right now because I don't have the actuals in yet. Info on CEO bonus, info on Stevenson indicator. I do a live version in my Excel model, as well as the live one that's up on a Google Sheet that I made a video about recently. Here's that free cash flow chart I talked about in a previous video and tweeted out. Some math that I did for Bitcoin for a video I made responding to Kevin Paffrath saying that Q2 earnings were a disaster. They were not a disaster. Some alternate scenarios that I've run. This was for part 3 of my Stevenson indicator video series. And now you've been on the full tour of this model. Okay, so back we go to the detailed model tab. I was about to explain where do you even start trying to do an extremely detailed build-up, and you ask yourself, all right, well, when you buy a Tesla on your phone or on your computer, what questions does Tesla ask you that determines how much you pay for your car? So you have to think, all right, well, we want to have all of those options included in our forecast. And then before you can even get to that question, it's all right, how many cars is Tesla going to make each quarter into the future? Well, as long as the orders exceed Tesla's ability to produce, the answer to that question can be answered with just, okay, what's the design capacity for each model at each factory? How many weeks were they producing cars? And at what production efficiency rate are we guessing? That's how you make a forecast. So the vehicles produced number here is just A times B times C, right? Or in this case, X8 times X9 times X10. That's how you get to the number of vehicles produced. If you believe these, then you believe 11,211 is how many Fremont Model S's Tesla will produce in Q1 of 2023. Make sense? All right, then you need to know what the beginning finished goods inventory is, and that's an easy question because it's the same as the ending finished goods inventory for vehicles the prior quarter. However many you had at the end of last quarter is how many you had at the start of this quarter, right? But how are we getting those? Well, you need to do some fancy math to figure out, okay, how many vehicles do we have to start the quarter? Plus, if we take the total deliveries from the prior quarter and divide those by 75 days, this is an industry standard calculation, days sales. And then we assume that in this quarter, Tesla will have 8 days worth of sales of ending inventory. And then we subtract from that the amount that we had to begin the quarter. There you go. That's how you get to this ending finished goods inventory number. And the vehicle deliveries will just be the number you produced plus the number you had already to start the quarter minus the number that you were going to expect to have in ending inventory. That's how you get your deliveries forecast for each model at each site. And there's a formula here for forecasting how many of those deliveries will be leases. I'm forecasting it'll be about 14% of deliveries. That's a number that we often see reported by Tesla for Model S and Model X, which is the next vehicle you see here. So same deal, same rigmarole. This vehicle is still ramping up. So I've got that having a pretty good Q4, Q3, maybe somewhere in between the amount that we saw in Q2 and Q4. So these are low volume products, Model S and Model X, but it's still important to get a good forecast in here for them. They are still good gross margin earners for Tesla. Tesla's happier to have them than not have them. Here's Fremont Model 3. So these you can make a lot more of. So in each of the first two examples here, we saw a design capacity limit of about 1,000 per week. We have seen Tesla actually exceed that, but never for very long. So Fremont Model 3 had at one time produced 8,500, and I didn't feel like lowering that number when they used some of that capacity for Model Y, so I just left it, and I use instead a lower efficiency percentage because some of that line capacity is no longer available to make Model 3s because Tesla's using that physical space at Fremont to make Model Y. So there's vehicles produced, beginning and ending inventory, and deliveries. Pretty flat there. So I expect this quarter Tesla to produce and deliver a little less than 60,000 Model 3s from Fremont. Then for Model Y, we've got production capacity of 5,500 at a much higher production efficiency, yielding a little over 60,000 for production and deliveries. So between the two of those, about 120,000 combined 3 and Y out of Fremont is my expectation for this quarter. And then for that to ramp up some, not a lot for either of these, but a little more room to get a little more output of both of those models from Fremont as time goes by. They're doing pretty well already, though. Then for the Fremont Roadster, we're not going to see any in 22 or 23. That's what Elon has said, is that we're not going to see him in 23. So that's my expectation as well. Then for Gigafactory 3, Shanghai, this is our first Shanghai vehicle. So I've got the production capacity at about 8,000 per week there. So that would get you, a little over 400,000 per year of just Model 3 from Shanghai. So they had a low quarter in Q2 with all the lockdowns and the limited capacity once they reopened. And they also had some downtime. So you see here for the first time, that's not 13 weeks, that's 11 weeks. That's not 13 weeks, that's 9 weeks. And then for 3 out of 4 quarters in Shanghai, I only expect 12 weeks of production anyway due to local holidays. So in Q2, you're supposed to get full production. And that's going to end up being the lowest production quarter in 2022 due to the lockdowns, unfortunately. So we have Model 3s ramping up quite a lot. Wow, that's going to be a double in Q2 of 2023 for this model over where they were in the prior year due to all those shutdowns. So yeah, I am giving them a quarter to ramp back up again from the downtime they had to increase output. So hopefully that works. Model Y did the same thing, so I've got them at 10 weeks of production in Q3 at 92% efficiency, and then hoping that they get right up to their 14,000 per week capacity quickly going forward. We'll see if they can make that or not. So that's Shanghai. Next is Berlin. So one of these days Berlin will make Model 3s, but it won't be in 2023. They are making Model Y, and I've got the weekly production capacity ramping up for them pretty steadily over time. Optimistically hoping they can get to, 4,000 a week at 35% efficiency. It's hard to ramp up a factory, so that would get you a little under 20,000 vehicles produced and delivered out of Berlin. Tesla never provides us that level of detail. I kind of wish they would. I shouldn't say never. Sometimes there are hints that you can use to back into what the numbers were, but there's never like a report out of, hey, here's all the production and delivery numbers by model, by site. Some manufacturers do that, but Tesla is not one of them. Then on to Giga Texas, the headquarters for the Tesla Corporation, now in Austin, Texas, where they are also ramping up Model Y. So you see the same kind of weekly production capacity increase here, along with production efficiency increases over time. I thought they would do better than this in Q2, and they didn't. So production has been limited. I've got them trailing Berlin by a little still in Q3 before they ramp up, which I expect should go more smoothly next year than it has this year. People forget that even the Shanghai ramp was pretty slow. Like at the end of 2019, they were already producing vehicles, and it took them all of 2020 to ramp up. So you got to give a factory 4 quarters to get the kinks worked out of the production environment. Next is Cybertruck. Austin is going to make Cybertrucks in 2023. Now, maybe we won't get any in Q2. I have 4 weeks at 4%, which gets me 420 Cybertrucks produced in Q2 2023. And in a previous video, I said, hey, I did not just punch that in there to amuse myself with a funny joke. But you can see that in this quarter, which is a total crapshoot and nobody knows what to expect, it might be 0. I did amuse myself with a couple of jokes here. So that's what I have plugged into my forecast for Q2 2023. Maybe we won't get any Cybertrucks at all, or maybe we'll get that many. We'll find out in less than a year. And then in Q3, we'll ramp these up some. So I'll cheat out here to 2024, just so you can see how I expect Cybertruck to ramp. And I have 2025 here as well, but I'll just let you use your imagination for what I think I've got out there, rather than share numbers certain to be wrong. I mean, these numbers were certain to be wrong. Whatever you forecast, it will be wrong. That's the first rule of forecasting. Then we have Semi here, which I guess I've already shown you. Semi, Elon has said we will see deliveries of before the end of this year. So I have 8 Tesla Semis being produced in Q4, and then 50 deliveries in Q1 of 2023, almost 100 in Q2, 150 in Q3, 300 in Q4 when they finally start to ramp this up to serious production. The Semi is very different from everything Tesla has ever produced before at scale, so I expect a very slow ramp on this product. Cybertruck too, I mean, that stainless steel exoskeleton, there are not a lot of experts you can bring in to tell you about how to produce stainless steel exoskeleton luxury vehicles at scale, because that hasn't been done before. But you can see out into 2024 what I'm expecting here as that continues to ramp up, but I'm not expecting huge Semi delivery numbers for a while. Now hopefully Tesla blows this out of the water and forces me to take this forecast way up. We'll see. I would love to be wrong about that and have them beat what I'm expecting, but that is not a high volume industry, semi-tractors, but it is one that needs to convert to EV, so I'm glad to see Tesla doing that, pioneering the way, leading the effort. So that gets us to our totals for all sites and all models, where these are just adding up. You can see the sum formula in the formula bar. Just add up all the rows above it for what the weekly capacity is. I forced all of these to be 13 weeks because that's how you get to what your production efficiency is. There are 13 weeks every quarter, so if you're going to total it up and then see how you did, here's the sum of the total production that you have, so this would have been the production efficiency. Now don't lose any sleep over this number because of stuff like the Model 3 at Fremont that I mentioned earlier. It could not be producing at 90% because some of those lines have been repurposed to make Model Y, etc., and some of these are early in their ramp. So don't worry too much about what that number is telling you, but it will improve in the future as more factories become more production efficient. Over time, there's your total ending inventory, beginning inventory, total deliveries. So I'm expecting a little over 360,000 deliveries in Q3 and almost 450,000 in Q4, which, goodness, that is, I mean, close to double what it was last quarter in Q2. Now, that, you know, I've mentioned way too many times the reasons for that. So we've also got the totals here for lease accounting, days of sales and ending inventory. These numbers look pretty great. Let me chase them back to the prior year so you can see, hey, they weren't always that low in the single digits. They were often double digits prior to this. Look back at some of these years. Yes, I do have all of this information at this level of detail all the way back to 2018. So yeah, the inventory management was a lot worse back then than it is today. You can see these numbers dropping consistently down to very low levels today, even in a problematic Q2. That's a pretty good number, but I'm not expecting miracles going forward, so I have it still in the single digits, but not as low as we've seen the actuals come in. So that'll give you stuff like inventory build or drawdown. What's Tesla doing? Are they delivering more than they produce, or are they producing more than they deliver? You can see that number here. These are my assumptions for days of ending inventory down here. And that gets us to the totals by site. So if you want to know how much Fremont is putting out in terms of total output for just that location, I have those here. So I expect Tesla to produce 550,000 vehicles almost in 2022, and then 618,000 in 2023. So pretty good lift there. For Shanghai, we can see that this year I've got them at 730,000, and next year over a million. Over a million from Shanghai is my expectation for next year. Then for Berlin, this their first year, 62,000 for the year, and next year over 300,000. So that'll be really good for them to start contributing meaningful amounts of gross margin toward Tesla's profits next year. Texas, we have here at maybe 50,000 this year, then maybe 350,000 next year. You probably want to know the year after that, so I'll give you that too. 700,000 in 2024, and then for Berlin, maybe almost 500,000. They're not making Cybertrucks in Berlin. So that's those, and I'm gonna need to end this video here because the next section is the average selling prices. I'll get to that in part 11. So what I'll say here is, if you're enjoying my forecast review series, Click the like button to let me know. It also helps the YouTube algorithm recommend this video to people like you who are Tesla fans and interested in earnings and that sort of thing. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, you could go ahead and subscribe to my channel. And check out my Patreon page if that's another way that you would like to support my efforts. And there's a lot of nice people who are doing that. Thank you to all my Patreon supporters. And I will see you in the next one.